All right, today we're putting on our detective hats. We're going to take a look at a single X-ray, one with a pretty suspicious-looking spot on it, and figure out how doctors solve these kinds of mysteries. We're going to decode the clues hidden inside our very own bones, clues that can solve some really high-stakes puzzles. So, let's get into it.
So, it all starts with something like this. You see a shadow on an X-ray, a lesion, something that just shouldn't be there. Now, it could be totally harmless, or it could be the first sign of something really serious. So where do you even begin? How do you turn this one picture into an actual diagnosis? Well, our lead detective in this whole story is the radiologist, and their number one tool, the most important piece of evidence, is the plain radiograph. Yep, the classic X-ray. You know, long before all the super fancy, high-tech scans, this simple image held all the keys. And as you're about to see, it's still the most powerful first step in the entire investigation.
Every good detective knows exactly where to start looking for clues. And when it comes to a strange spot on a bone, the investigation always, and I mean always, kicks off with two critical pieces of evidence. First, what does the lesion actually look like? You know, its appearance. And second, how old is the patient? These two facts right here are going to shape the entire investigation.
So that first clue, what the lesion looks like, really boils down to one crucial feature, something called the zone of transition. Think of it like the crime scene tape. It's the border, right where the lesion stops and the normal healthy bone begins. And how that border looks, well, it tells us pretty much everything we need to know about how this thing is behaving.
And you can see the two possibilities so clearly here. On one side, you've got a non-aggressive lesion. It has a narrow zone of transition, a really sharp, clean line, almost like someone drew it with a pencil. That tells us it's growing slowly. But on the other side, that's an aggressive lesion. It's got a wide, blurry, ill-defined border, kind of like it was made with a can of spray paint. That suggests super rapid growth, and right away, the alarm bells for something like a malignancy start going off.
Okay, let's move on to our second main clue, and honestly, this one's a game changer: the patient's age. This single piece of information is so powerful it can completely pivot the entire investigation. Why? Because certain culprits, so to speak, only tend to show up in specific age groups. And the magic number in diagnosing bone tumors? It's 30. Yeah, 30 years old. This age acts as this crucial dividing line. Whether a patient is younger or older than 30, it radically changes the list of likely suspects.
Here's why that number is so important. If your patient is under 30, you're mostly thinking about primary bone tumors, things that actually start in the bone, like an osteosarcoma. But if the patient is over 30, and especially over 40, two brand new suspects jump right to the top of the list: metastases, that's cancer that spread from somewhere else, and myeloma. It's a completely different case file.
So, with our two main clues, that border and the patient's age, we've got a working theory. But, you know, a good detective never stops there. They always look for more evidence. So now, we follow some secondary leads to either confirm our suspicions or maybe point us in a new direction. Our first secondary lead is called the periosteal reaction. So the periosteum is this thin layer that covers the outside of the bone. When it gets irritated by, a tumor or an infection, it reacts by making new bone. I love this analogy. It's like an eyewitness account from the bone itself, telling us exactly how it's responding to this intruder. And the bone's testimony can go one of two ways. A benign reaction, which comes from slow irritation, is thick and solid. The bone basically had time to build a strong defense. But an aggressive reaction, it's messy, it's layered, it's broken, because the periosteum is in a total panic and just can't form solid bone fast enough. And get this is a huge clue. A malignant lesion never causes a benign reaction. So if you see that solid, uniform new bone, you can pretty much rule out cancer.
These aggressive reactions have some really distinct patterns. You might see a lamellated or onion skin look, with all these thin layers, or a spiculated, hair-on-end appearance, where new bone is literally shooting out from the surface. And then there's Codman's triangle, where the periosteum gets lifted right off the bone. Every single one of these is a major red flag for aggressive behavior.
All right, our next lead is all about location, location, location. Just like in real estate, where a tumor decides to set up shop inside a bone is an incredibly important clue. It turns out different tumors have their own preferred neighborhoods.
So if we're looking at a long bone, say, in your leg, there are three main zones. You've got the epiphysis at the very end, the metaphysis right below that, which is the growth area for younger people, and then the diaphysis, which is that long central shaft. And this is how location helps us narrow things down. It's like geographic profiling for tumors. For instance, if you spot a lesion in the epiphysis of a young person, you immediately think chondroblastoma. See one in the metaphysis? Osteosarcoma is a prime suspect. And a lesion right in the middle of the shaft, the diaphysis? That's classic territory for Ewing's sarcoma.
Pretty cool, right?
Okay, so now we've gathered all these individual clues: the border, the patient's age, the bone's reaction, and the location. The final step, and this is the real detective work, is putting them all together to see how these different pieces of evidence connect and build a complete profile of our suspect.
Let's look at a really tough case. Say the clues are all pointing to something aggressive. We have a young patient, a blurry border, a hair-on-end reaction. The obvious suspect is a malignant tumor, like an osteosarcoma. But this is where the story gets its twist. An aggressive infection, or even a rare condition called eosinophilic granuloma, can show up with the exact same clues. These are the great mimics, and this is where the detective work gets really, really tough.
And that brings us to the final act. After gathering all the evidence, considering all the suspects, including those tricky mimics, the radiologist is finally ready to solve the puzzle and present their findings.
See, it's this systematic approach that makes it all work. It's never about one single finding. It's about layering all the evidence. The border tells you the growth speed. The age gives you the context. The reaction shows you the bone's response. And the location points to the most likely culprits. You put them all together, and you can create a really powerful and accurate list of possibilities.
And in the end, it all comes back to where we started. In our modern age of unbelievable imaging technology, the simple, elegant, plain X-ray is still the single most important tool in this whole detective story. It's just a testament to the power of careful, fundamental observation.
So, as we wrap up this little investigation, it leaves us with a final thought. In our rush for the latest and greatest tech, it's easy to forget the incredible power of just basic skills. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other complex puzzles are being solved right now, not with the newest machine, but with the simple tools of logic, observation, and a really well-trained eye?